a test kind of helps, at least for the second user.
Okay, thank you very much. Good job. Okay, Chris, why don't we get started?
Okay, there it is. We're going to take a look at a paper prototyping session done for San Jose Public Library on clear entry points. This first one here, you can see the current design that San Jose uses for their homepage here at the Public Library. They've got these 6 sort of rather large boxes that show all the different things that you can do on their website. You can go this way, you can go this way. And part of what I notice is that there's some confusion with, like for example, if you see downloads there in the brown, they've got a picture of earbuds, so you would think music and all of that, but right next to it under books and media, you've got read, watch, and listen. So it's sort of confusing as to which way you can go. So that's what I was trying to address. Wasn't very clear. Here you can see what I was, once you sort of click into the next section of the Public Library's website, you'll see that instead of using 6 boxes, the subsequent web pages all have columns of 3. So I was thinking of a way to make the home page not only more consistent with the rest of it, but also sort of combining the ambiguity that I saw in the 6 boxes and making 3 columns. So what I end up with is something like this. And this was done using Photoshop editing software. Actually, it was GIMP. And for my paper prototype, I redid these in GIMP and then printed them out and used them as a paper prototype. I just liked this, the feel of this. I just felt cleaner, and I felt like I'd be more able to immerse the tester in actually dealing with the web page rather than having to read my scribbles, and my handwriting is awful. So here you see the sort of more simplified format. Here we've got books and media, and something that was missing on the original in the current 6-box model that they use now. They don't have these sorts of links on their home page. So return users sort of have to navigate through multiple pages, even though they know, for example, that they want job search or that they want audiobooks. So this way we also give them that option that they don't have to click through multiple pages. They can get it right from the home page if they want. And you see how some of these things have consolidated. Like here, for example, we have location and events together. For testing of the prototype, I tried to get 4 users that were sort of across different demographics. So as you can see, I've got one who's actually another SLAS student who's not in this class or hasn't taken this class, so it was nice to not have that that knowledge coming into it. Another female who's not typically a regular library or website user, and then 2 college students who were sort of my younger demographic. I noted down here that doing this because it's a public library, I probably would really want to use some other younger users, like high school and elementary students. I just don't have access to any of them, so I didn't this time around. Testing tasks, I wanted them to navigate through the homepage links, going through a few of the different web pages, specifically getting help with high school level homework, finding ebooks in Overdrive, and navigating to Storytime. Storytime schedule is actually not something that even appears on the public library homepage. It's not even a real thing. I just wanted to sort of test, I don't know how to put it, test the way that people would get to something without it being obvious. There's no links for that information. There's no way they would accidentally stumble across something that said Storytime schedule, so I wanted to see how they would get to where they thought it should be. These here would be the second level pages, so after you land on the home page and you make your selection based on one of those 3 columns, following that you'd also have to choose you'd land on one of these 3 pages and have to choose again based on what you were looking for. I apologize, these are a little smaller than I would want. I'm not sure if I can make them larger, but the idea being that we're still following that 3-column model, and you see how, and the public library does this now anyway, but we're sort of trying to keep the color consistent so people know the links on one page are blue, then they'll end up on a page that's blue, and so on and so forth. This is just sort of what I've said about using color versions on paper to create the paper prototype rather than it being something that was hand-drawn. Here are the results from my first user. She noticed an immediate error that I just didn't even expect. There was no way for anyone to know what was clickable and what wasn't. For example, if we normally hover over a link, we see that the link normally gets underlined, it changes color, something like that. None of my prototype had an underline or a color change, obviously, as they were trying to click, so they didn't know whether they could just click the heading or to click individual subsets. There was also some confusion over the phrase books and print, just because this user sort of felt that all books were print, what wouldn't be printed no matter what they were reading online, whether it be an e-book or a physical book. This wasn't enough of a discrimination between one type and the other, vocabulary-wise. Tester 3 really just sort of jumped right in and started clicking around everywhere, trying to make everything go very quickly. He also did notice that I had some inconsistencies in my colors, which was not so much a problem with the way the prototype worked, but just my, I guess, lack of attention to detail as I didn't color some things. After he'd sort of clicked through a bunch of things, then he also sort of slowed down and realized that he could also click on subheadings. But as I said, at this point there weren't any underlines to note what was a clickable link and what wasn't. So here you can sort of see some of those revisions. The colors here for books and media also match these sort of subheadings. They didn't before. That's what he meant by color. And then here you'll see I had to go back for my second round, and I actually added underlines to everything so that I think most of us sort of recognize that underline as being something that's clickable. So that ended up helping later on that I made those changes. Tester 1 noticed that there was easy navigation, because if they were specifically looking for homework, they could pick homework out of the submenu rather than, it's hard without going back and looking at the first slide, without knowing which of the three categories to go to. They could see, certain subheadings underneath, and they could click and go straight through it. There was some objection between the use of this word research in multiple places. There was sort of a question of, well, if I click here, will it take me back to the same page? That's something I would definitely have to address. I would have to fix this category heading of research/genealogy with better vocabulary, because that confused this particular tester. Tester 4 sort of didn't really want to be there, I guess. But I kept her on. I kept her results on because she was sort of had that attitude. You could just tell that this was sort of silly. Why are we doing this? She was the only one that actually noticed specifically that the front page was 3 columns, the next page was 3 columns, the next page was 3 columns. So I actually appreciated that. And she noticed that there was some visual consistency with color, and she sort of felt like that let her know where she was going. All of the testers pretty much at some point chose a submenu option from the main page instead of just a main heading. The exception to this was the SLIS student, who really sort of clicked all over the place and was obviously more just sort of interested in trying a bunch of different ways just to see which one she preferred. And then, as I mentioned, there were some comments about the way I worded things that would probably need to be addressed later on. As I said, there was no user that specifically clicked any erroneous paths with this new prototype. They all ended up where they wanted to be. They didn't have to back up at any point. As I mentioned, there's going to be some changes that would have to occur with the specific vocabulary being used, and that would probably be something that would get better results from actually sitting down, surveying people, or maybe having a little focus group to talk about what other options would be. For example, changing research and genealogy to something else, rather than continuing this a prototype approach that was sort of trial and error. All right, so that's what I have. Do I have any questions?
Chris, I appreciated in your conclusion that you might have done a different sort of, I guess, testing or survey instead of a testing for this kind of prototype. I like that you were paying attention to what your testers were doing and kind of decided that this actual sit-down testing scenario wasn't the best for what you were planning. So I appreciate that. So no questions. It looked really good. Thank you.
I have a question about the level of granularity in your prototype. I went for a much more simple interface to preference being able to iterate faster. Do you feel like having such a detailed prototype kind of was distracting in some ways to the users, and it made it more difficult for them to kind of focus on the task at hand? They ended up looking at a whole bunch of other stuff that might have been inconsistent but was just, for design purposes?
I'm not really sure if I understand what you're asking. Do you mean sort of the extra parts that would normally appear on the website, like the San Jose Public Library logo and things like that? I actually wanted to include that because I wanted to see, we sort of learned about this idea of having big targets for students to land on. So I actually wanted to see where their eye was naturally drawn. It's sort of hard to gauge that without having the actual mouse to watch move around, but just as I had them put their finger down to where they would click, I was trying to get a sense of where their eye went, and I sort of wanted a bunch of that other distracting information to see if the column approach or this sort of 3-box approach made things any slower or faster, and just sort of gauge the reaction to that. Let me know if that's not really addressing what you're asking.
No, that makes sense. If you were trying to see kind of how they would naturally, interact with that interface. I just noticed at the beginning of your presentation you had mentioned that they noticed some problems with the prototype itself and whether that was an issue of the granularity of your prototype.
I see. Yeah, yes, I think part of that was and part of it was like with the links, things we take for granted that, in HTML, if somebody's looking at a web page and you hover your mouse over something, the link changes. It changes color, or, there's some feedback from the system, and I just failed to include that sort of feedback, given that this was a paper test.
Hi, everybody. So I also did my research and testing on the same page error message for the San Jose State Library website. And I tackled this in a much more simplistic way, much lower granularity kind of prototyping. So that search bar that exists at the top of the page would remain the same. That input field is not what we're looking at, right? We're looking at the error messaging itself. So I designed an iframe error pop-up that would notify the user, like, hey, an error occurred, and would give suggestions to the user on how to recover from that state. As if you remember our 10 heuristics of